Hey.
Sorry about that.
Oh no, don't worry.
We're on stage.
Oh no, you can close the chat if you want. It's I don't know. See what happens when you try.
All these video chat things, you know.
Their UI is their
For me, it's the
admin.
CPU thing. Oh my God, it drives me nuts.
Oh yeah, I have some of that too. I don't know if Aldo. Dang it, I don't know if Aldo is getting these messages here. Come on, Aldo. You might have to register something. Yeah, it's that, but their admin UI is really challenging to find stuff in. Things can be really buried. Like there's not just a setup page. There's all these tabs, but there's also like a master tab. There's this weird like setting space that lives between like your account and an actual event or hosting thing. I'm just complaining while Aldo's gonna join. But come on, Aldo. Shoot, I don't see him. You might not be looking at it. There he is.
Sorry if I seem distracted. I'm just speaking to Peter at the same time because
Yeah, you're good. I know
you're.
I know you're trying to get that going. All right. Thank you all. Okay, so we are recording, maybe, and share the old screen.
What time is it there, Aldo? You're on mute.
Sorry, it's almost 8 a.m.
Oh, it's almost 8. I thought you were. I thought you were 3 hours behind me.
Just 2.
Just 2. All right. That's
lots more early morning meetings.
Yeah, that's the only problem here. But it's okay because you know, since you live such an outdoorsy life, you go to sleep at 9 because you're already dead. Like every day I swim like an hour, so at 9 I don't want anymore, and then I wake up at 6 or 7.
Tired. That's not. See, that's a good lifestyle right there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, so starting with the ongoing process, which is watching PRs come through, and we being Peter and I have managed to kind of create a bit of a process here, which is labeling things in a way that helps us go through steps when it's time to go to do a release. But what I found, because we don't have a standardized process here, what I found I end up doing is watching PRs as they come through, right? So whenever I see something merge, so this is my GitHub notifications, and this has actually become a really important channel for me because I can see the activity when there's a new merged PR on the main Redwood repo. I will go in and take enough of a look at it so that I can apply some labels over here. So the first one is, and the most important, is the milestone that's coming. So this one was in the previous release, but we use milestones to tag PRs with next release. So if this was not yet in a release, I put the next release milestone on it. And then looping all the way back to the end of the process, one of the last things I do is actually edit my milestones. I'll try to show you that. And then I change the name to the actual name of the release, right? So the next release would become v0.26. So everything that had a next release label on it now says v0.26. I close the milestone and then create another next release milestone. So that those things could be automated. But what's nice about that is I could go look at my milestones. So there's other ways to do this in GitHub, right? By releases and tags. but I could go look through and see anything that was milestones closed, but I could open a milestone, but I could go look through and see everything that was attributed to v0.25, for example, or 25.1. And then I put a date on it too. So it does have some nice workflow to it. But so I'm putting a label on it because I'm going to use that to process. And then the other thing I'm doing, this could be a good one, is I'm adding some other labels. You see those there. There's 3 labels that Peter and I mostly use. And again, these are labels. So one is docs. So next release docs. Does this have any kind of documentation, either release note documentation or updating docs that's required? There's next release test. So that's kind of a tag we use. Do we need to do some specific testing on that release? And then the other one is breaking. So is there something about this that I know is probably breaking, and we're going to need to identify that in the release notes. The other hidden step here is that people don't actually run the code from their PRs for the most part. So in the last process, for example, there were several merged PRs that came through that were broken. And so an example of one of them just from yesterday that I could show you. So if I go to, things are slow, but close pull requests, right? So even if we have CI running, which this could be handled in tests, it's actually, so there's things like, all right, this was a really strange one. How would you test for this? So this one came through, and also again, reviewers are actually not running the code. They are reviewing the code, but 75% of the time, I don't actually think reviewers or people merging the code are running the code. So for example, this one had not been merged yet, but when you ran this, you got this weird console logging mess that was happening. You started to get a duplication of things. And then when I ran it, sorry, the DT and I back channeled on this in Slack afterward, but it actually was printing this thing out like 5 or 6 times. Like this was the first one, and then when I really ran it locally, it was printing out 5 or 6 times. So that just would never, that weird console rewriting output thing that was happening with Lister is just not going to show up unless someone runs the code. So you can see how this becomes a pretty hefty bottleneck when you've got 40 PRs to go through for a release, and you just don't know if people actually ran the code locally to see if it worked. And then we also have other, interdependent things that are just hard to test for. We can do our unit tests on things in isolation, but then, right, the end-to-end tests come into play of like, does the whole system work? And we don't have full test coverage there either. So those are the things I'm thinking about as well when I'm going through. But what I try to get to then, so the ongoing process is labeling PRs as they come through and making sure that they're not missed there. Because what I'll end up with is, so this is all kind of the ongoing step one. What I end up with is a bunch of PRs. So we don't have anything, do we have anything that's next released yet? We should. Okay, we got one. So it's like, hey, okay, now we're kind of getting into like, it's time to release, right? So what I have now, and I'll check to see and make sure everything was labeled accordingly. But what I do here is I will have however many PRs are going to go into the next release, and I've got a list of them. And so this is kind of my like final audit list, and I'll have 15 PRs on average, and I'll go through them, and then I use this list here of the final created ones to say, okay, and then I'd make a note somewhere. I've been using Notion more often, and I'll go through these one by one and say, okay, that was I just make a list of like, okay, I need to test that one. Okay, the docs weren't completed. I need to check and make sure the CLI docs are completed. Was there an issue someone opened on the redwoodjs.com, or is there a PR that's associated with this? Those aren't always linked. And I just kind of build one major task list for the release from this list of all the merged PRs. I don't have a good, well, actually I could show you the last one that I did. Let me go into my Notion. Notion data. So isn't that nice? That little picture I get. It's a different one every day. So, okay. Now I have multiple Notion accounts now. It's gonna be all kinds of great. Where was my? See, Danny, I want you to fumble watching me use Notion as well, because where's my
Command K.
It's to find things. I thought I had. See, I'm in a different view here, but I had a. I thought I had a high level thing that was purely all my. There it is. So this isn't open on my little Notion thing. It's open. Okay, so this was the big one. So this document is what I end up with after I go through all the PRs. I end up with. This was a little bit more in depth because there's a lot more going on, but I just end up with like a whole bunch of things I need to do before the release. And some of that is things to test or people to check in with. And then I end up with a whole bunch of docs that need to be updated or written. And then I end up with like some specifics for the release notes, right? So is it breaking code? And not only is it breaking code, but now I have to create the documentation for explaining what was broken and what needs to be done to resolve it if you want to upgrade, right? And then I create a list of like, okay, when this PR goes, like when I do the release, here's everything else I now need to merge, right? So if I publish to NPM, then I need to go over to redwoodjs.com, and there's probably going to be several PRs at that time that need to be merged into the docs code base. So that's my preparation process, to kind of get things ready to go. I could dig into some things a little bit more. Where I've been drafting the release, I actually come over. So again, another thing that could be automated, but if we went into, there's a lot of things that could be automated here. I'm not sure who can do a draft release, but as much as I don't like working necessarily with Markdown for some of these things, what's nice is if I draft all the things. So I copy and paste. Actually, see, it's even more. I'm trying to get into the real nitty gritty details. I'll copy and paste some of the Markdown from here just so I have a structure and outline. And I grab some of this stuff just so I have my outline of like change fixed. I don't know, like this, none of this was really intentional. We just kept adding things to it. So the structure here, but I would grab all that and then I copy it into a release draft. And what it makes is, so I create a release draft. But what's nice about it is if I just copy the raw text of the PR name, if I copy the raw text and the PR name, the PR number and the @ username, GitHub adds all those links for me. So that's why I've been using it in there, right? So I just have to copy the name of the PR, GitHub adds a link there, and I don't have to do a bunch of linking to things. All of that's not necessarily needed, but it seems nice to have in the release notes. So other things I do manually is I group all these myself, right? And I could tell you some methodology around that, but it just I know what things I would like to see if I was reading release notes. And then I also add these groupings to things because in something like this, where there's 40 different things that came in, I'm just thinking I don't really care about everything, but like I'd like to know what things happen with Prisma, for example, or I might skip things that are docs related in there. But so I include every PR that came through. Sometimes I'll double them up. If it was like 2 PRs back to back that came through, I just put them on one line. Honestly, the reason I started doing release notes like this was I wanted to give everyone credit. I wanted to be really explicit and include everybody. And actually, I wasn't even including like the core team, because at first it was just like all Peter and then me and then Rob on the release notes. So so it was like, I don't need to make that, I don't need to point that out. But when other people started contributing, I would add their name, because it was kind of like, that was what was different, was that somebody new. So I was really trying to highlight, I didn't want to make this about the core team. I wanted to give props to people that jumped in for the first time. So that was my whole impetus. And then also I was deadly afraid people would try to upgrade, couldn't do it for some reason, they just quit on Redwood. So I started getting really anal about the release notes, because I wanted people to trust that we knew what had broken and we had the best possible, elegant, like we were already thinking ahead to helping them upgrade to the latest Redwood, right? Like, we'll take care of breaking changes. You can read our release notes and trust us, and we'll make sure we can get you the next version. Personally, I know what it's like. This happened with Meteor early days. It sucks so much to be an early project and you fall a couple of releases behind and the upgrade path is just brutal. And then you quit. You're like, oh, I just don't want to do that anymore, because it's not the fact that I have to do things to upgrade, but it's the fact that it's really hard to upgrade. I just didn't ever want anyone to have experience with Redwood. So that's where I got really deep, and that's why these things started growing so much. I also really highlight things that changed in Prisma. So I think in reality, that's not a burden on us to actually pass along. Like, here's all the things with Prisma that broke. But I swear, man, every release they have, something breaks. And it's going to trip somebody up who's doing something with Prisma. So I'm like, look at this. Someone would have to read through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different release notes for Prisma in one upgrade for Redwood, and no one's going to do that. So I try to highlight some things here that they were kind of top of the list for their release notes. But that's doubling up our work too, because now, well, I have to pay really close attention to Prisma's releases, because it breaks stuff every other release, and they're not doing backwards compatibility for more than like 1 or 2 release cycles. They're like, hey, we're gonna deprecate this thing, and 2 releases later, boom, it's gone. So I'm trying to make that clear. Yeah, so anyway, I start, the way this thing fills out is I copy and paste it into that draft with the outline. I did this in Notion a few times and it just wasn't helpful. Again, because of just copying and pasting was kind of a pain. Which I hear there's software that helps with copying and pasting, right? So, I try not to get too deep into that yet. But yeah, anyway, so I drop in all these things, and then the PRs that came in, that gets filled out first. And then I just update these sections. I start filling in the information for breaking, and I start filling in the information for how to upgrade, manual code modifications, right? It'd be super nice to not have people have to step through that. I know that's something we'll add, is some abilities to help with code mods. But then there's other things, right? Like, by the way, all your deploy commands are done. So we're always going to have something that changes to that end. Yeah, this was a really complex one. Okay, so I kind of jumped from the very start and then to the end of the process. For me, the last things I write is the intro. We don't need an intro, feels nice. And the last thing I write, the highlights, right? So kind of when I go through the PRs, I figure out what we want to highlight from there. All of that is, superfluous in a way. It's not really about the release notes itself, but I'm just trying to help people get excited and digest. Again, I want to give people credit, and I want to motivate people to upgrade. Those are probably my two major drivers. So, okay, that's the beginning and end. I need to backtrack a little bit and fill you in on two other steps in the process. Well, actually, let me just open up Slack and show you how to go through all those steps. Maybe we need to go into, I'll share my whole screen. It's just not going to be as clear, so you guys tell me what needs to change in terms of being able to view. And things are probably going to blow up a little bit. Oh, maybe I should share this screen.
Oh, we lost Danny, it looks like.
Oh yeah, because he said his he said his internet can blow up. And that was like that happens to me too. Like web-based screen share can often blow things up. When he comes back, he should be able to join automatically. There he is. That says he's here. Let's see if he needs to go in the next release for sure. He might just be down internet entirely.
This is how most end of the world movies start, with a meteor hitting Europe usually. It's
That's right,
American.
because that's how we would know we have 30 minutes.
Yeah,
30 minutes to live
before the shockwave hits us.
before the shockwave hits. And then it's like you think you're gonna run, but you finally just like acquiesce for the last 5 minutes and hug the one you love and watch the thing being titled. We're talking doomsday scenarios, Danny. So.
Sorry,
Okay.
my internet just dropped off.
No, you're good. So once I've gone through the PRs themselves, I've made my list. I've actually looked at like specific code and run PRs locally. So a lot of times that process is going to be, honestly, that new PR package install has been really helpful. Redwood Tools is kind of hit or miss for me, but so another thing I end up doing is I create my, where is it? Open recent. So I've got my old trusty friend here. I've got a project I call XX-delete. And I will normally create my own fresh install of a project using the template in the repo. And this becomes my test bed for all the QA stuff, right? Because I haven't really, I hate it when VS Code does that sometimes. It replaced my Redwood. Replaced my Redwood project with this other one. We'll see if this pulls up. Okay, so I'll create a project, and this becomes my placeholder for now, running through end-to-end tests and then having to do some manual tests. Something actually, when Peter recently updated the end-to-end Cypress tests to use the packages from the current branch, it broke a part of my workflow that was pretty important to me, and we'll have to undo that with this next release. But so what I will do, so here's the task. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I think everybody has. So my computer's running really slowly right now. There's the test tutorial script, which taps into these Cypress steps and the code there. But what I do is there's a few times throughout the process, like testing a PR, I'll have the PR branch checked out and I'll run through the end-to-end test for that specifically. But for the most part, what I do is I create my testing project. So XX-delete, for whatever reason, it's really easy to find and it's pretty clear what I'm supposed to do with it. Delete it when I'm done. I don't know where that came from. But I will run my tasks, test tutorial, and I'll run it.
For me, I'm sure, DP, because I use XXX logs everywhere.
Well, I was doing XXX, and then I thought, like, that just seems weird. Like, I don't know. What's my wife going to say? Look at my XXX logs. So it got truncated, and X just wasn't enough. I got to the XX.
She would just be pissed that you have no creativity. She'd be like,
No.
seriously?
Seriously? XX, like, can't you hide it? So I'll run this. I'll run the test in my XX-delete, because what I can do in my test project is I can manage what packages are installed, right? So I can manage the canary if I want to be testing the canary. So kind of a release candidate test. If I want to be testing a specific branch, I could do Redwood tools. But again, that broke with whatever Peter updated, because now if I run this, it won't use my packages in my testing project. It will use the packages from the whatever branch I'm on in the Redwood framework. So that we need to fix that, because well, okay. So what I run through, and hopefully, so now I'm kind of doing end-to-end tests for the whole release, right? Everything's been merged into main. I'm testing something, I'm doing release for the whole release. And typically I find something broken and I'll try to diagnose and go back. But then if I don't find something broken, then what we don't actually test right now is we don't run things like Redwood Test, and we don't run things like Redwood Storybook. So after my test project is being created, and after I've run through the Cypress tests, I've now added a bunch of code to this project. Like, that's what the Cypress tests do. So they've kind of gotten a state that's the final state of the Redwood tutorial. And then I will run through it's trying to pull up here, but I run Redwood Test. And it turns out that damn thing breaks a lot. And you need to make sure it's an easy thing to miss, because you want to make sure that your tests actually pass. Otherwise, it's hard to tell what's a failing test versus is the test runner itself actually failing. And we've had a lot of things breaking with this. And even the last one, like all the Prisma commands, there were several things. So because I think it's getting less brittle now, but we create a test DB. We populate a test DB. We have scenarios now. And there's just a lot more going on under the hood with this guy. And then the other thing is, silly things like, I mean, we can just add more automation to this stuff, but it turns out I had fixed this command to use the new Prisma commands that we had. This is what makes me so like paranoid. I'm like, you're in my head of paranoia right now. But last time around, I fixed everything, added the new Prisma commands, so our test runner was using the new Prisma commands, and it fired up the test DB and ran through the test. Perfect, no problem. And then for whatever reason, I did it again a little bit later, and it errored out. And it errored out because the new Prisma commands using the migration were like, oh, wait, everything's out of sync. Like, I can't, like, your test DB is out of sync now. So now I have to, so had I not run the damn thing twice, I wouldn't have thought that, like, oh, I need to actually adjust the process because of Prisma. So it's stuff like that that just makes me paranoid. And no one, like, nowhere in our automation or CI do we actually, like, test the test command or have like include it in the EDE tests, right? So, and I'm not sure how to do that. And then I also run, I was trying to let this thing run through. And then I also run Storybook. And Storybook can break too, but I just want to see the Storybook fires up and I can actually see that the mocks are working. No test found. Just go. I might just quit this out. I was going to show you guys that all these tests pass, but I don't think it's working there. So that's a little bit of anomaly there. That's is what it is. Okay, so that's my test project, and I run through that several times throughout the whole thing. Can I just quit? Great, I quit. Now, I have another project that I use, and this bad boy has been along with me for the ride for a long time, because now I've tested local dev, the tutorial process, and I've tested kind of our DX tools, right? So another thing we don't test very well is our command line. Our command line gets used to go through the EDE, but we don't have any CLI tests, right? Like, if there's some weird stuff with the generator, if there's any edge cases, that's manual testing too. So for example, Rob went through and confirmed and made some adjustments so the generators could handle Prisma relations. All that was in place. He just needed to tweak a few things. And that just became more manual testing and trying to figure out what was going on there. Because the other thing I'm thinking in the back of my head is I have to explain this in the release notes if there's anything breaking or upgraded, like, hey, this is what's changed. So I need to understand those things. And where was I going to go? Okay, that's this tutorial. So this friend of mine has been around since, well, let's take a look, since version 0.3.2. So this project has been with me every version since 0.3.2. And this became my place where I actually run through my release notes. I apply the updates, the code modifications, and everything needed here. And then I will install the Canary package. And I'll fire this up once, Redwood Dev. And the reason I was doing this back in the day was, and maybe this has gone away, there were a few other things I did to test Prisma migrations. Do you guys remember when we had like incompatibility? Like Prisma didn't know it, but we couldn't actually go from one Prisma migration to the next in a Prisma release, something would break. So I started doing this because it was the only way to be able to check was to have an existing project and try and upgrade it and see if it worked with Prisma migrations. So those things have gone away. But now what I use this mostly for is, it's my sanity check for like, are the upgrade instructions clear? Like the code modifications, I'll apply them here. And then I upgrade to the latest Canary, and then I release this. I deploy this on Vercel, and I deploy this on Netlify in the opposite order. Netlify, and then I got my Vercel. And I tell you what, things break. So I got to the very end of the last process. So I have, because the other things that aren't included in the process that I'm going through is like all the auth things. I leave auth alone, but Playground auth, I'm just assuming our auth maintainers take care of auth. But I do have Netlify identity here. So the kinds of weird failures we've had with the deploy process. So my main branch gets deployed to Netlify. My Vercel deploy test branch gets deployed to Vercel. And the kind of failures, so this was a fun one, this last release. Got all the way to the end of my test process, deployed, Netlify deploys fine. I get a failure with Vercel. And it just, my function blew up. My function was over 50 megabytes. Well, what had happened was, however Vercel was building out the functions, there was a new Netlify package. Remember, Netlify took, Prisma. There was a new Prisma package. Prisma changed the name of @prisma./CLI to just Prisma. And I had done that. I'd done that update. And whatever happened there blew up the deploy on Vercel. Everything else was fine. It was supposed to be the same package. They just renamed it. And you could even use one of the same. So I have no idea why. But it deployed fine on Netlify. It did not deploy on Vercel. And then the other thing, right? And so we just have to deploy. And then the other thing that's fun about what happens here is you may get clean deploy logs, but that doesn't mean that your Prisma client can actually talk to your database, right? So, and there's weird things that have happened that seem innocuous in the code, but so that's Vercel. I was going to show you some deploy logs. Yeah, here it is. So you can have clean deploy logs, but I still have to go and actually check out my test app and make sure I'm not getting any connection errors from the client talking to the DB. So I have a DB set up. Oh, you know what this is, Danny? Have you seen this one? This is that issue so here's a fun one. You'll never see this in local. When I deploy, it takes the, what is it, like the auth.user object, I forget what it actually is, and it's now null. Is authenticated is true. So I get this error down here that says cannot read property email of null. Oh, we lost Danny again.
Middle stand.
I've seen this one in Everfund actually when I tried upgrading something, and yeah, like this would never come up unless you deployed, like you said.
Just kick me out again.
Yeah, sorry, man. So there is an issue on this, and DT's looking at it. I think it might be about our new way we refresh tokens. So this happens when I deploy. The change occurred in our 0.24 release.
Would you do something for me?
I'll tell you. You want to see how to fix it? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go on network and then XHR, and then just refresh.
Yep, and tell me if you need to make some things bigger here.
It's fine. I can see. Totally fine. Okay. So if you look at the first one, does it come back? Yeah. Well, it comes back as null.
Yep. There, it's current user. That's what it was. Yeah, I was trying to pick the user. Right. So what happened is, so this happens on deploy, started in the V0. So upgrades were fine until 0.24. Something changed in 0.24 so that for the 0.25, this was happening. So I was logged in, and I'm always logged into the site. Hot refresh happens in the background, and then now as a logged in user, I get a state where I am authenticated, but current user is null. And so the code that's throwing, it's that simple switch in the UI that's like, hey, show the email. Is the user authenticated? If they're authenticated, show the email. Authenticated, yes. Email, no email? What do you mean email? No, we got no email here, right? So throws, right? I don't know. I call this the screen of death. I don't know what else to call it. So there is an issue about that. I think we need to decide. I was trying to escalate this one, and DT is looking into it. This is really hard to reproduce because, I did get it to happen locally. I did get some steps to happen locally, but you kind of have to like roll your repo back and forth, right? Because you have to like set it up, log in, and then do a little bit of an upgrade step. Kind of fun. So yeah, man, like stuff's hard. And then I become more obsessive, right? Because I'm like, damn it. Okay, so the way to get out of this is application, local storage, right? Where am I? Oh, there it is. Go true user, delete, and there I am.
You know what I would do with the message? Something went wrong. I would say something went wrong. About 10 years ago, you should have gone to law school or something like that.
That's so. There's something went wrong. Your path diverged.
Yes.
But it's been a while. I don't know if you can do anything about it now.
That's how I feel sometimes.
So here we're good, but I didn't catch the ePipe error until a few steps into it. But so we need to hit these endpoints, right? Like I need to know that these calls are working, and then I do test the login here to make sure that I can log in. Sorry, my shortcuts.
Could you run a Cypress test against so automatically deploy a very basic site to Vercel and Netlify and run a Cypress test?
Totally.
On every provider?
Yeah, totally. I think we could do some stuff like that, right? Like also we could have some deployed sites that we're hitting with pingdom. Because now that we know that there can be things like, or some kind of API input check, now that we know that there can be things like Prisma performance errors, did you see that ePipe stuff we were dealing with, Aldo? There was a 5.0, there's a connection error, had something to do with TCP.
Yeah.
They haven't figured it out. They just rolled it back. But so, if we had some deployed sites that we were checking and just hitting the endpoint there, that'd be nice. And we'd be able to see like, oh wait, something's happening with that Prisma performance. Like we're getting connection errors.
Yes.
So that's it. So often what happens, and so once I'm like, okay, this feels good, and then and you guys get it, like that workflow from like E2E test, set up my project, deploy, like that takes a lot of time to like replicate every time, because I'm having to get clean. I'll have to reinstall my packages, right? And then run my tests and then deploy. And then if I get to the very end of the process and I'm like, oh, damn it, I have to like revert and use the old Prisma packages because it won't deploy on Vercel. And I have to test to figure out how that works. And then I make the choice, do I run all the way back through all my QA tests again? Like I just changed the code branch, right? Like, do I go through, right? And so then you're like, it depends on how tired I am, right, to go back through it all. But I think there's places that we need to stay alert to, and it's just going to take some manual eyes. Well, I don't want to get into the solutions here, and obviously there's places we can automate. But if all of this is in one person's head, so the timeline is what really gets messed up. I will say, hey, it's time to release. And what I really mean is I'm going to go make my draft notes of what needs to be done to release. And that takes some hours, but I also then have a meeting so that I come back, right? So kind of a day goes by, and in the meantime, there's things happening in the repo or there's conversations going on. So you kind of always have this feeling of like you're getting behind. And then I start going through the checklist that I've created, and if I identify things and I try to get help and pull people in, I'll try to diagnose it myself, right? But then that takes another step. So there's kind of there is a process that's getting ready for release, and that takes its own time. And there's a process that's actually doing the QA to release, and that has its own steps in it. And then from there, I never actually showed you the final steps. Okay, so let me now jump into the final steps, which are we have a workflow. That's not the right one. Right, so I'm not sure if you guys have seen this it's right there, contributing. Don't go away. Right here. So a local command, Peter and myself have NPM permissions, but there is a script here, Aldo, for, it's so slow.
You've cleaned it.
Yeah, for going through. Oh, good. It's right here. So we just outlined the steps we'd go through, right, to do this. And I screwed up. One time never mind. All the things I've done. Clean the repo, very important. Install. Like, so now I'm doing the release process, and these are all the steps for it. And then there is a task, Aldo, if you guys want to look at it, update package versions.
Mm-hmm.
Because we now have the template in the main repo, we run a Lerna command to manage the package versions, and then the script now goes into the template Redwood packages and updates those to the same version as well. So now the template is updated, and that's what that command does. I do a commit. I do a git commit at the version. I do a git tag at the version. And this is a new process, so this could all be one step, right? Right now, it's like this could be one script versus like a script and several other manual steps. Then I push. Then I build locally so that I can then publish to NPM. Right? So now everything lives on NPM. But we're not done yet. And it's also, you do want to make sure that everything did publish to NPM. That's a confirmation message you want to see. So now I come over to my release notes and I take my draft, if there's any finalization to do, and you need to actually publish that on GitHub. So as the release notes are published, you get the little, you see the new tag that popped up, and then you have to take your release notes you created and publish those. I copy these and I go in and create an announcement here. This will pull up. So I go into the announcements and I copy and paste my release notes. Yeah, it's just how do you actually broadcast that you've updated something. I know people are following our project, but I don't know if everyone's following our project. Also, I thought it made sense to publish things in the forum because there is some distribution that happens, like the forum broadcasts that. But I'll go into the announcements and put it there so people get updates. This shows up in our Discord chat as well. And it's nice to have some threaded discussion if needed on the release. That's why I've made this the central place for talking about and trying to announce releases when they happen. So we do get some threaded discussion. I'll manage this as well if we have a patch .release. You saw I put the update there. And then at the top of this message, you can just kind of always tell people like where things are at the start. The last thing I do is schedule a tweet, which I then pin once it's scheduled. And that would be what I would consider the end-to-end release process. From managing PR is to actually getting the marketing messaging out. There you go.
Wow.
Right? So, few things here. Like, I didn't start that way. It just grew in complexity because you're like, yeah, just need to do these things. You need to manage it, right? And I wasn't always as paranoid. Like, I've been paranoid, but now I'm like really paranoid because every time like something goes wrong, then you get burned. And again, instead of like taking the time to automate things better, I've just added more to my checklist, and we're finally there. It's not sustainable, and yeah, that's where we are. So, questions?
Well, I have one question. I don't know how you manage to stay. Every communication coming from you is always positive and upbeat, and it gives everyone else like energy. But you are the guy who's dealing with the hardest part, and you still remain positive. It's admirable, I have to say.
Hey,
I would be going crazy. Like, this is really hard.
Totally.
It's tedious. I need
never let it show. Like, certainly not in public, but
No,
also
you guys are kind.
internally as well. You don't really show it, to be honest. Every
Well-
now and then you see a little bit, but that's being human, you know?
Sure, it's cool. I'm raging on the inside. No, I think a part of my personality is, for better or worse, like things are probably supposed to be hard, so that's normal. But yeah, no, this is the bottleneck here is it's at the point where, well, thank you. That's probably learned experience. My intensity left unchecked can have a pretty negative effect on the people around me, because I kind of get that like, just get it done, and that doesn't play well with others. I think I've learned that it actually makes me feel better to encourage other people. Right?
You're the Hulk. The secret is that you're always angry.
And if you ask my wife, that's true. I have a little burning rage just always going on. It's not that bad. So I jest a little bit, but so here's some things that are important, and this is again things I've just learned, and you guys could share some similar stories. It really helps to know what's going on in the releases, like forcing me to go through. That's where I'm finding people to invite to the contributors meetups, right? So there's some benefits. Like for me, there's pro cons, but like some of the cons are, holy shit, people are doing a lot. And I don't have appreciation for what they're doing until I spend time in this release process, right? Wow, there's a lot of complexity here with managing, right? So there is a little bit of experiencing the pain and the feedback of that I've done that intentionally because it makes me aware of some other things that I'm grateful for, as well as then I can invite people in to doing the contributors meetups happened because I was doing release notes and was like, who are all these people that are helping out? Let's hang out with them. So
yeah, so
right.
So some of
and we don't want to lose all that. Right?
I want to
Like,
give you
there's
some
benefits to
feedback.
that. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's some positive and some negative, right? The positive is that you learn, you get exposed to all the features, you meet the people, but then there's a whole mountain of negative stuff. I have some notes here, and I'll just go through them quickly. So when you try to automate anything, doing it top down is usually the first instinct, but it's very hard. Like, I want people to understand the whole process. Let's see how we can get it to work. But if you do it bottom up and focus on small things that eventually add up to making it easier, that's more manageable, especially in processes that are more creative. Like, there's human judgment here. Some of the things you really need to get them in your head and make the decisions. But there are other things that you could automate away. So I want to talk about those briefly. Some of the errors should be caught by the developers themselves, ideally, when they're building, when they're writing code in the Redwood repo, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff that they could have caught there on their own, and that gives them feedback cycle to fix it, right? So there are some errors that are already caught, right, by the compiler. For example, if you break a type, it's pretty obvious that you broke a type. If you break something that's not type, but there's a runtime test and it runs like a unit test, you'll catch it. So that's an area of investment there. It's like trying to make it so that it's very hard for developers to think that their code is fine, right? Adding as many tests as possible, and even running the end-to-end tests if you can. So every time you're working, ideally, this is an ideal scenario, right? I add a single line of code to Redwood. There are layers of tests. There's the static type checking. Then there is the little unit tests that run. Then there are some projects that get generated, and they run the other things. Like, okay, let's start to start up Storybook. Let's start to, so kind of the Cypress things. Ideally, that should be like a whole cascade of things. And over time, we can make them, we of course, it's very slow. So you say, oh, well, we need to cache here and there, but it's code in the end. Like if we know that that's the goal, over time, we can do that. Another issue that I see is when it comes to merging PRs and when it comes to contributing, the layout of the repo right now, it's not very granular. So we have these packages, and then you have like big chunks of code, especially in the CLI, for example. So any change is going to conflict with somebody else's change. So if you make the code base more granular, so if there is, if everything was in a file, every function, was tested in a single file, taking it to the extreme, right? That would make it very easy for people to contribute stuff without breaking somebody else's stuff, because I just added a new function. And as long as the code base is organized in the same way, there's no overhead to having more stuff. So my code base is like 5,000 files big because I keep adding stuff. I know I didn't break anything from 3 years ago. I just added a new function that does something else, right? And it makes it easy to merge repos, to merge PRs, because there's no conflict on a file level. So yeah, that should also help. What else?
Yeah,
Well,
we ran into that really hard for the first time with Danny's pre-render, because pre-render touched so many files across the code base that this was the first time we've really said, like, we need to manage what gets merged. Like, things are ready, but they need to hold. And that's just, I think that's a good evolution of the project. We've never been strategic about what the next release should include and where things would go. We've never had forethought about that, but that'd be another part of that process. So there's a lot happening with merging itself that like during PRs and at the time of merge, we can do better at those two events, right?
So I can give you an example. The path syntax for the router, where you have paths, the curly brace for the parameters, that thing, the parsers for that logic are scattered throughout the code base. There's some in structure, there's some in the internals, and that's because we have the wrong. Well, there are many reasons, but one of them is the way we're organizing the code base is by having these packages first. And so it's hard for people to choose where to put things. And there are a bunch of files that have comments like, do not, if you add some colors, remember to also add them over there, because we have colors here.
It definitely sticks out, right?
Yeah, it's a sign of a symptom. An alternative organization strategy is to say, forget about packages. So that's like what I do, is everything in one source tree. And you organize by topic, you organize by the most granular thing that makes sense. And then in the build process, the builder kind of creates a slice of whatever it needs and groups it as a package. So sometimes it does that by, I mean, the nice thing is when if I want to change the way the parser works, the path parser, I go one place, right? And it's going to affect 6 packages or 4 packages. And I can test that one, and the discussion is focused on that. And then I can also see what it would break, right? Because I can use, you know, if I can find the references to that function, and I see where it goes. So that's also, again, I'm talking bottom up. These are small things that might feel like, okay, but that's very far away from my goal, but it would help you get there, and it will help people. And I've seen it in large projects. Like if you organize code by topic, but in a granular way, magically every contribution is easier. Every discussion becomes easier. We're no longer saying, there's so many comments like, should we create a new package? When you were doing the pre-render stuff, Danny, you went through the whole thing, right? It's a pre-render package, but it touches everything else. What belongs where? Well, there's no good answer, because the divisions are arbitrary, like the package. The only reason to have a package is when it's a public-facing thing. If you need people to use Redwood.js/web, then you want to talk about the web package. Like in our case, right? It's like that's the product. But most of the other stuff, that's unnecessary overhead.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
yeah, conceptually, I understand what you're saying, but
I'll show you later.
It scares me.
Oh no, it's actually, man, it's gonna be a simple change.
All right.
The release notes and all that. Sorry, go ahead.
I totally agree with Aldo on what he's talking about here, because there's a massive cognitive load when you're writing code, where you have to not only think about the bit of the code you're writing, but you're also thinking about the learner process, the packaging process, the building process, and then also the type dependencies and the circular stuff that can happen. And that just adds a level of complexity that really we shouldn't need to worry about. But I say all of this, but I also want to add, I have never found a better way of doing this, which is why I'm excited to see what Aldo can come up with, because I totally agree with your concept, Aldo, of they're just functions, right? They're all just files, and the packaging can be one step later. It shouldn't be in my head when I'm writing the code. That should be one step later after I've written the code. But you know, it's a very sound concept. I just don't know in practice. I've never come across
it works. It's possible. So yeah, I don't know what the right time to talk about that is. Like, but I could show you guys what anyway, I'm doing it for Redwood, and I did it for myself, and now I'm packaging it's in a tool that will have it. Okay, another thing. So the CLI, for example, that it can be tested, right? It's possible to derive. Okay, the general topic for me is more general. Is we have the TypeScript compiler. The TypeScript compiler does a lot of stuff for you. When you create a project, it reads all the files, it links all the symbols, it has a type system, it has all these things. And you could leverage those for everything you need. So for example, the CLI, you want to generate the interface of the CLI, don't use yargs. Find a way to derive it from the type information of something that is easier then to test, to refactor, because it's just a function or a class or an interface, right? So doing more of that automation so that everything is in a single, so you say, I'm going to choose as the center of gravity the thing that's already at the center, that is the programming language and the compiler. It's already there. Let's use that as wherever we can, because it has all these consequences later. Okay, what else? Yeah, I don't know. I have a bunch of things. I'm gonna let others talk, and then I can come back.
No, that's those are good, and I think the ground up approach is going to be really helpful. You guys are seeing it. Thanks for letting me get all that. Yeah, thanks for letting me get all this out.
Another thing. Okay, another thing. I think all of the files, like when you were writing your release notes and then the tweets even and everything, should be in the repo. And everything you do to automate that can be a little TS function in the repo. So once you remove the packages and you have this big source tree where you can put anything you want, some of those files are going to be meant for automating stuff, even automating the build itself. So you reach this freedom where you can say, oh, I need a way to go and fetch, like call the GitHub API and get all of the
That's
the
good.
PRs that are typed
That's
like this
that's
and put it in a markdown. You write a function that does that. You
Right.
run it, you do the first iteration, and then you commit that. And then whoever comes next will look at that and say, oh, this is a good starting point. Let's improve on this. And over time,
Yeah, that's
you start.
really good. Yeah, and then I can because I want the and that's sorry to interrupt, but you're naming a couple things. Like I've got a centralized place, and I can use the code to get me the draft, right? Like there's going to be that there's always going to be that level of refinement, but give me the starting place. Other people could do that too. And then I didn't think about it from the okay, now I want to distribute, right? And that's I hadn't thought about. I hadn't solved that in my head. I knew I hate copy and paste this across all these places.
So,
but if it's in the code base, then you can automate the distribution as well.
I'll show you something.
That's
so here
good.
I have. Do you see my my screen?
No.
Oh no.
How are you guys doing?
Wait.
I knew this would take some time, and we got started a bit late. Everybody okay for a little bit more time here?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just show this because once you see it, they will be like, I'm gonna make it more concrete. Okay.
Okay.
So this is my mega repo, 5,000 files and counting, and you have all this automation stuff, and I can just click one of these, right? And I have a little extension that says, oh, I understand what this is. I know how to run it, so I can run it from here, right? And then if you go to, this is the topic branch, right? This is where I have all the topics. This is where I organize code based on related concepts, not on packages, right? And I go over. Yeah, because it's I try to reuse the categories that already exist, right? So for example, all the npm code is here. So look at this: npm registry fetch info for package, right? So I just created this function, and it just does this. It fetched the info for a package, right? And I have this, and I have a test for it, right? And npm publish, right? What does this do? It publishes a folder, and they're they're atomic, very simple. Get no module for name, blah 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 blah, and I don't have to worry about as Danny said, I don't have any cognitive overhead here because I just focus on making this work the way it should be, and later I will reuse it for something. And in Netlify too, I have a bunch of stuff for to talk to the Netlify API, and I keep accumulating these things, but they don't matter. It's my code base is not slower or worse because these things are there. It just keeps growing, and then when I need to do something, I go back and look at my code and see, okay, I already have this stuff. Anyway, but try to do everything with code and in the same code base. Especially Redwood is a developer tool itself. So I'm trying to stop there. Right. So it makes sense that things that we learn for ourselves, we can then later use for the Redwood framework, right? So it's a good idea to try to automate everything with code. Eventually, it will transition to the product. A lot of things you're doing could be automated.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. I think. Well, okay. So next steps, Dom, were you able to take notes on that cluster?
Yeah, I've got a lot of notes for sure, and I can go through if you want to make this recording an internal YouTube video that's unlisted, I can timestamp it as well and make sure everyone can we just wouldn't have it public facing at all.
Okay. But, we could pull it down. Yeah, that'd be helpful. I think the next steps is really so. Danny, my intention and thought with the 0.26 release is let's do it together. And what I just showed you, I don't want you to there's no expectation oh yeah, you're going to release it now, right? But let's do it together. Let's try to collaborate on making the things. And maybe we try a few things that Aldo even just said as far as I don't know, put something in the repo. I don't want us to slow down getting pre-render out necessarily. So, but this is the trap I always fall into, which is I just want to get this thing out, right? I could take the time to write a script, or I could just do the manual steps. And
it has to be so easy to write it that you actually think it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and I don't feel that now. So
yeah, that's.
But we
from
can
a
go
roadmap
through,
point of view. from
Oh,
a
go
roadmap
ahead.
point of view, just so you know, like this is not something. First, I'm this is going to be like for 2 more releases, I think. So for now, yeah, but because in order for this to really work, you need to have a better build system in general, like, and then it lends itself to this kind of automation. And for that, we
Where
need
could
to
we get a better build system, Aldo?
I don't know. Yeah, it's man. I've been I haven't. My girlfriend is so mad at me because I haven't left. I've been working nonstop for like a month on this, like really nonstop. I wake up, I start, and then I end at 9. But it makes so much sense. Like the fact that you guys are so close and you're suffering, it's just it excites me because I really think I would love it for you guys to be like, yeah, Aldo is so awesome. I love Aldo. Yeah, that's drives me.
We think you're awesome.
So I
Anyway.
want to do.
Well, that'll be okay. That'll be good. So this release,
No,
let's get it out, Danny, and but let's collaborate on it and just figure out. You've seen the steps, how we could do that. I think, along with pre-render, I did go through and added some milestones to ones I think that we held from last time that might be good for this one getting out the door. Maybe not adding too much overhead to some of the QA we need to do. But we can definitely get some releases out the door.
And
get some PRs merged.
So I'm done talking about this approach.
Yep.
Other thing, some of these errors, of course, are impossible to catch. Like some of them are complex, and they will, like the authentication one, right? You need somebody to do a certain sequence of steps. So the way like big projects deal with this is they create the insiders channel. That's the early releases, and then they encourage people to use this stuff for a while, and that's how they run into it's free QA, right? If you set the expectations correctly, so errors don't become a problem. So as long as the user says, I agree that this will break, it's a nightly release or something. So what do we have there? What's the approach there? Is there anything?
No, I think that's a good approach. We don't really have every time a PR is merged, we have the canary that goes. That's an automated process. And people have been testing that. We don't have a good feedback loop for it's hard for someone to even say like, hey, here's what PR broke things. Right? There's just a nightly canary and they could report back and say something's going, but we haven't really cultivated those.
How many people use the canaries right now?
It varies, but I mean,
someone
more than a handful. Yeah, there are people using canaries, but it depends. Like, because currently, it's going to take some people a little bit of time to get up to .25, right? Because that was a pretty major one. So we'll see a little bit of a slow lag to people using Canary because Canary is always ahead. But like over the holidays, when our release schedule was really low, we had a lot of people running Canary. We had a lot. So it ebbs and wanes.
What is the pitch for people that? So I'm thinking of the VS Code Insiders that I think is great, where they've managed to get that. They have two horizons. They have the release and they have the insiders, right? And the insiders, they tell you kind of the new features that will be there that are exciting. So you sometimes feel tempted to use it. Right. Sometimes it says this feature is coming. It's still not in the release, but you can find it in the insiders. And I think that has the effect that a lot of people transition to the insiders.
Yes.
And now it's different because it's a development tool. So you're not building your own startup with it, right? And if it breaks, your code is still there, so you can just use another development tool. It has some differences, but I think, I don't know, you have to give would it be possible to do something like that? Like to say.
Completely agree. I think we need to get to V1 and we could get into some strategies around, do we want to do some release candidates, right? Do we, and that would be a way to get people on board with testing things out. That might be a nice way to do it. We haven't right now. We've really optimized for a couple things. We want to make it easy to contribute, and there's a couple levels of that. One is, do they understand the code base? Can they get started in the code base? And the other is like, how intimidating? How much resistance is there in opening a PR, creating a PR? A lot of that's felt. A lot of that's cultural norms. and more things you add on to like, here's what it means to do a PR, I think that creates some resistance. So we've been really intentional to new contributors. We don't want to load them up with like a massive to-do list of things you have to do if you want to create a PR. We've wanted to let the maintainers handle that, but then that process is unclear. So that's what we've optimized for right now, Aldo. But that's come at the, right, so then the cost is, right now we've created, there's a lot of complexity, and now we have some overhead in that process, so balance it out. But I think once we get to V1, we can start looking at, we'll need to start looking at some other strategies around organizing for release, right? Like, here's the things we want to go into this release, here's, right? So organizing that. Do we want to do release candidates? Do we need to create some branch strategies in Git so that we could automate things at different levels along the way, right? So, which that would make a little more differentiation between stable and canary. All questions.
Yeah, I was just
all
around
questions. So
yeah, I think maybe we are in a position now where there's a lot to be gained by automating basic stuff and fixing like the code base, and that's probably later. Like yeah, the VS Code team is a rocket ship, right? So they got to that point where they can do it. Like, I think maybe it's too early for us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can be done.
Yeah. So anyway, we're in a good place. Thank you all. I need to split, and I know you guys need to do the same. I think the next step. So Aldo, yeah, I could jump in on things later this afternoon. I could let you guys know, Dom, if you want to see that. But I'd love to dive more into the build world and what you're creating.
Yeah,
do you want to do that? I wouldn't be free until 2 p.m., 2:30ish Pacific time.
I
Does
can
it
do
matter
anytime,
when you do it? Okay.
and we can keep it very short, and I'll just walk you through the main, like looking at the docs of the tool, like it exists
Cool.
because in part it exists, and just, I don't know, get feedback. It's not ready. I'm working on something so fucking hard now, so I'm trying to add meta programming at the compiler. So you know, I'll show you later. But that thing has killed me. I mean. But it's worth it, because a lot of the problems that you said that you mentioned now,
yeah.
For example, the generators and the templates, right? Right now, those are very brittle. It's very brittle because the templates are strings and they can fall out of sync with the framework, and then also they have to be shipped with the package and read from file from disk. It would be better if you could just have this ability to generate code. I'll show you. And then when you're editing as a Redwood Core contributor, you can actually see if things are breaking at that level. Like, will the generator break, right?
Yeah,
like, that's great. Possible with some extensions. But yeah, I've been but it would be good for me to like lift my head up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that would be. I think we'll be at a good place today. I mean, tomorrow at the latest. We could do it, but I'll
just ping me whenever you want.
Okay.
Ping me whenever you can.
What's your? It's late for you now. What's your schedule? And where's the pre-render stuff at?
So yeah, I'll just a second before we get into that, DP.
Oh yeah. Things.
The code mods thing, Aldo, that would be a lifesaver, I think, for the experience of not just for DP doing the release, because it's really painful to go through and find out exactly what changes every single time, right? Especially when you have 10 different PRs that may have broken.
What do you mean by code mods? How do you see it? I'm a little lost there.
Yeah, what I mean is instructions like, now you have to go into index.js and change this line of code like that. And then you have to add a new file called this whatever.js. It's manual steps like that we need to run. I know you can automate it with a bash script, but I'm wondering if there has to be an elegant way of doing this, right?
Right. Yeah. So
the pre-render one is a great example where what it does is it takes what you need to do. The manual step is add a couple of lines to the HTML and take part of the JSX and move it into a different file, right? And it's not that complex when you understand it, but it's still like, when you're upgrading, it should just prompt you to say, hey, I'm about to do this. Is that okay? And then, and what I'm hoping is, like the Prisma team tried and probably failed, that we have a framework for applying these changes, so that I don't mean just one time. I want to use Alder's brain.
Dom, I
to
forgot
write my
things.
own.
Dom, I forgot things. I have to go through and update example projects. Once a release is out, there's a dependency. The example blog, that's the project that the Vercel docs, like on Vercel.com. Hey, deploy Redwood to Vercel. They use a branch on example blog. So that's a dependency. That's supposed to be up to like the latest release. I have to go and apply code mods to another project and upgrade that so that it works for Vercel. And then the same thing happens with the other projects, right? So like there's code. So the code mods thing, like if we could do that, we have a whole like little ecosystem of projects that are dependencies that have to be upgraded. I forgot. Yeah. That's another thing I have to do.
So good news is it can be done. But so
Thanks,
David,
Danny.
you have to run, or
I do. I do. I've got things I didn't do that I don't know if I'll be able to do because I've got meetings I have to do.
Okay.
So,
okay. That was a glimpse into David's head.
That's the real. That's the real challenge with all this for me is I no longer like there's diminishing returns on my time on this stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in me being in it, but now it's become this real conflict between not only am I the best person, but like, yeah, I can't drive other things and be the bottleneck because I'm becoming the bottleneck over here. But that's my stuff, right? I'm asking for help. The little rage inside of me is diminished, and I realize I just need help from my friends. Go ahead.
So about code mods as a general. So let's talk about scenario, and then we'll break it in apart. So we upgrade Redwood. Somebody has 3 projects, right? And they want to use the new version. And right now they have the upgrade instructions, and they have to manually go and see what changed and kind of figure it out. It would be nice if with each release we could say there's a script that will do it for you, and if it doesn't, it will throw an error, right? And it would allow you to go. It wouldn't allow you to like skip 3 versions, but maybe like from one to the next. And I know that you guys have been working on something like that. Correct me. Do we have something like that? No. Okay.
We talk about it.
Okay. Let's talk about that's a scenario. Now, there are many ways of going about this. There are some code mod tools and tool chains, right, that are like ESLint-ish, right? You have rules, and the rules will detect the thing and then change it. And that's great, but we don't need that because it's actually a more general problem, and it's very easy to model ourselves. And also because we are using TypeScript, and because we have our because of the layout of the projects we want to change, these things will most likely break, like whatever's out there prepackaged, right? It assumes things that are no longer true. So we can roll our own, and when we move to a project in the state where I see it go, it will be even easier. But even before getting there, we can do it. So what are the basics? The basic strategy here is to build something called a convergent transformation. A convergent transformation is something that you apply on a value, and it will change the value. And then you pass it on to the next convergent transformation, and it will change it. And then you pass it back to whatever you did before, and it will change it, or maybe not. So at some point, it says, I'm done. So you run it through you apply the convergent transformation to something n times until it converges. And then it says, I'm done with it, right? The nice thing about this, about writing all these transformations as a convergent transformation, is that you can combine them, and then you can apply them in a loop. So you apply one, you apply the other, and if this one changed it, you start all over again, right? And you're guaranteed that at the end of this process, each of them will have achieved its goal, right? So another way of thinking about it is each of these mods has a goal, and it needs to have a detection phase and a transformation phase. The detection phase is this is this already at the end state? Then I'm done. And then how to take it to the end state. Now, because our code base is complex and we have types and we have more stuff, the best way to do this would be to use full tsmorph, because it exposes everything that we need. You need, what you said, we need to refactor JSX from one file to another. That means you have to carry over the imports and stuff, right? So tsmorph is built for that, for transformations on code. It's very expensive to run because it has to create a project, and then every change it recompiles the project, but it shields that from you. Yeah, so what I'm saying is I see a way in which we can have our own little library. We modeled it using the convergent transform pattern. So we know that it's robust. And we can use tsmorph as the actual abstraction that lets us interrogate our code and then modify it. And we can borrow some ideas from Rome. I was looking at Rome, the toolchain now, and NX and other like projects that are appearing. And yeah, they are. The good news for me is that like they're way behind what I want to do, but they have really good ideas. And Rome has this idea of allowing you to revert anything that you make, right? So you apply a fix, and then it saves like a snapshot of the project before the fix, and then it lets you. The UI is kind of easy, so it lets you see the changes.
That's nice.
So we could, yeah, but it wouldn't work for what we're doing because again, it's I don't know why people do it this way, but they, instead of reusing the TypeScript compiler, which is our god, right? It is our god. Like we are, when you're editing, you're already telling it, I trust you. You tell me what's wrong. So why don't we just go all the way? Anyway, okay. So the use cases for the code mods is to change projects as we change the framework, right? Or is it more to them?
So if you look at the last few releases, for example, the release notes, there's DP always has a breaking section that explains how you fix it, and this will give you a good idea of the varying types. It's not always one thing. It changes from release to release. So
yeah,
if you have an elegant solution to this problem, then I'm all ears, because I can think of solutions. I just don't like them. You know, I don't think they're elegant.
Yeah, and they end up taking a lot of overhead just to keep up to date. But right, yeah, that's And I actually have it 2 sections. There's breaking. This is what broke. This is why. There is the how to upgrade. The how to upgrade section is the modifications you might need to make. So then it steps through. Not everything that's broken has a code mod, applicable code mod. Like some of it is just like FYI, right? So, or sometimes deprecated. Sometimes in breaking, I'll put a deprecation thing, like a reminder Prisma. You really can't do that now, Prisma. Gents, I really have to go. Thank you. I feel better just knowing that I've shared my pain. And this is why you guys could charge me a lot for this therapy. So, Danny, I want to lean into you on the timeline for getting the next release out. Typically, we don't try to release any later than Thursday. So it just depends on where the pre-render stuff. So really, I would say if it feels like you and I could start through this process tomorrow, right? And you get going, we've got some PRs to merge, right? I've labeled those. Then let's do it. If you don't feel like tomorrow is the time, and I could end it, right? You could start it, I could end it. But if we can't get this out by like my end of day tomorrow, let's wait till Monday, right?
Yeah, we definitely won't get it for this week, DP, because even if we get pre-render in, I know that there are a bunch of PRs that I've asked to be blocked because of the pre-render stuff. So I'm sure once that goes in, I'm going to have to help Toba with multiple PRs and conflicts there.
Well, so what we could do is just release pre-render.
Sure.
But you think about that. I want to defer to you on that end. but don't feel like pre-render is a big enough thing that like if it makes sense to just like, and it's big and it's got a lot of scope. If we just like, there's only one merge in ahead of you, and that is DOM updated a doc. So we have zero QA that needs to be done right now, other than pre-render. So if the only thing we get out is pre-render, and there's 2 PRs, and then we can open the deluge afterward of things coming in, I'm fine with that. And I don't think that .27 needs to be, this stuff we're talking about with the release process, that's probably going to be .28 or 2.9.
Further down, yeah.
Right? But let's keep it in mind.
There's, I think you guys, like as in the founders, probably need to have a chat about the structural changes that pre-render requires. Basically what I said about app.js and index.js. It's just a stylistic decision.
Did Peter flag those or?
Yeah. So Peter, like, it's not that I have an opinion on this. I've just done it this way because it works. It's not that I really want it to be that way, you know?
Well, if you have any questions that you think more people than just Peter should see, you should probably post that and tag some people in the core team channel.
Sure.
Or the release shipping channel, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think there's only one remaining thing. We've kind of gone back and forth like 1,000 times already, just going through so much of the PR. And like Peter's like really reviewed it properly, and it's made me feel great because it touches so much of the code base. So that's good. That's the final thing that's left.
Okay.
I think Aldo's not gonna like the change Peter's gonna put in because I'm a little bit on Aldo's side with TypeScript. I think TypeScript can be the god. So
what changes this? Sorry, just curious. What
Peter wants to use JS docs. Is that the change, Danny?
There's a circular dependency thing that arises if you place the code in a specific package, right? So logically, Peter wants all the pre-render code to be in the pre-render package, but there's one particular piece that gets imported multiple different places. So I placed it somewhere else originally to just stay away from all of this trouble. But yeah, so it's stuff like that we need to.
Well, however, again, I don't want you to feel like there's a whole bunch of other PRs we need to include in the next release. Okay. If we have 1 merge, 2 merge PRs, and it's all about pre-render, and let's ship that, I think that's great because we do have a backlog and there's going to be a deluge, and that deluge is really going to slow things up on the release cycle for this time. Cool. So
I just want to point out the obvious here, like that problem is because of the packages. Like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Aldo. I totally agree with you.
That's a really interesting concept. Like, we see that a lot, Aldo.
I have 5,000 files, and I have no problem. Like, and I'm sure there are 50,000 cycles because of the way it's one project, right? That's another reason too. Yeah.
I totally agree. We're blaming,
but
the problem
I like it. I like that you guys are dealing with these issues now, because it's gonna feel so much better when we get out of them. Like you're gonna see, it's hard. It's even hard for me to articulate why. When I remember like Tom and other people saying, "Wow, you're so fast. You can just put things in a day out there." And I was putting like products out there because it's my code base. As soon as I moved to the Red Bull code base, oh my God, like. And I didn't even realize it. Like I've been working all these little kinks out. It's.
I want to be fast. Well, here's the other thing is that these things, I mean, in my projects, and then I really need to go, but the upside to fixing these things is the kind of improvements they have on team collaboration dynamics. Like some of them, I'm starting to see stress symptoms across our teams that are due to the complexity of the code, the processes, right? And that creates its own kind of like, you get grouchier, you're not trusting the system, you're not trusting each other, and it literally, it has an effect on morale. So the upside of this is all the CD stuff, right? Like the CI/CD, and the upside of improving these kind of things and making it focus is research shows it has a demonstrable effect on the morale of a team, the satisfaction of working with the team, not just shipping more code, but like overall collaborative performance goes up. So it's crazy how these kind of things really feel like they're the little details, right? Like, DevOps, no one wants to do it, but it has such an effect on everything, including the way people collaborate together. So, and you could tell like Aldo was happier when we first met him, and then he started working on the Redwood code base, and look at what we've done.
Yeah, that's the main culprit.
I don't know. I want to be on Island Aldo.
It would happen on any code base, basically.
I agree. This is the natural
worry.
state of it. I wanted to add the impetus for like, there's more to gain than just the workflow, right?
No,
there's more to
agree.
gain than just the automation.
It's so nice. It would be so nice to fix something and then have it release quickly. Like it just closes the ROI
Totally.
loop for everyone, right?
Yeah,
and
so
it would make David happier. So
yeah, and then we're all, and if I'm happy, everybody's happy. But yeah, my goal is like when we say, hey, it's time to release, that should take a couple hours, right?
Yep.
Like let's get to there, and because I think that's what's going to make this work for everybody. So, all right, really need to go. Dom, you could just I'll get the video. If you just want to hand stuff off to me, you don't need to feel any more ownership on those notes. If you want me to send you the video, we can figure out how to put those together. I would love to help. So we can sync up on that tomorrow. Danny, I'll follow your lead, and I'll be checking in with you. I'm going to be up fairly early and online tomorrow. Whenever you want to grab me tomorrow, you let me know. So, and I'll defer to you on the pace for getting the release out. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Aldo, I'll look back. Thanks, gents. Appreciate you all so much.
Hey guys.
It's kind of fun.
Awesome.
It's kind of fun to do this stuff, right? Like, this is a good time.
Yeah.
Good time.
Well,
All right. Later. See you, Island.
Later.
Later.
You just have to. I'm ending.
Just close.